Welcome to Growing Up in Easton, a series about a time long ago during the 50s, 60s, sometimes the 40s, when people were living a much more independent life. Parents were not helicopter parents. They gave their children more freedom, and the children benefited from that. Today, we welcome one of those children from the Almquist class of 1957, Linda Manning Williams. Those of you who watch Community Forum have seen an interview with Linda regarding all of her books that she's written. And currently she is just about to publish her 11th book. So we welcome you to Growing Up in Easton, Linda Manning. And,
Thank you.
And I'm so happy that you could join us today.
Well, it was good of you to invite me back. My goodness. And thinking about memories of Easton, I have to preface that these are, of course, my memories. And I was a girl in Southeastern living on a little farm. One who lived in Northeastern would have different perspective, I'm sure, on the memories, because the memories are a story in each person's mind. And quite often they're different. If I got a classmate from Northeastern and talking, we would have seen things differently in those days. Because I grew up in the 40s. I started school in 1945. There were 7 people in my class, 5 boys and 2 girls. And there were 2 classrooms, 2 grades in each classroom. Now, I had Northeastern grammar. That was very different aspect of life, even down to the Christmases when Mary Frothingham gave us each a Christmas present. I'm sure you remember that. My memories are that we received, and first I have 5th grade especially, because I got my green Girl Scout soap and was astounded that she knew I was a Girl Scout. But we didn't see her in person in Northeastern. She actually went to your school, I think, and is that what happened with you, Priscilla?
Well, are you talking about the Christmas program?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We all walked from the Northeastern Grammar School up to the high school, which is the yellow building, which is now apartments on Lincoln Street.
That was my class.
And we were in the auditorium, which also doubled as a basketball court.
Yes.
And there was a stage. And the girls would go up on one side and the boys would go up the steps on the other side to the stage. Mrs. Frothingham was in the middle, and on each side of her, behind her, were 2 Santa Clauses, each with a huge big sack. And so the boys had a boy present back in those days, and the girls had a girl present back in those days.
That's
and
true.
So we took our present with our left hand, and we walked over to Mrs. Frothingham, and we shook her hand with our right hand and thanked. And then we turned around and exited down the steps back to our seats. And that was really wonderful. My mother, who graduated Olive Rames in 1929, also received a present from Mrs. Frothingham.
Wow.
And as she recalled, it was a doll. And my mother never had a doll. They were very poor. Her father died when she was 6. And so her mother, and there was no Social Security then. And,
no, not till 35.
Right. So anyway, that doll was very precious. And Mrs. Frothingham was so generous. And we really loved that Christmas program. So tell me, I just recently read your description about growing up on a farm in Southeastern. I loved it. And of course, your writing is so beautiful. As a former creative writing teacher, I can assure you that your writing is just magnificent and brings every scene to life. So tell us a little bit about that. Maybe you can cover some of the things you wrote about.
I was so fortunate because my dad was born like 150 years too late. He would have been a Western woodsman, and he knew everything about the woods. He seldom went to school. He was in Avon when he grew up, and he seldom did 4 days of school a week. He was always out in the woods with his knife in his pocket. And he was even at that point in time, he was taking rattlers and milking them and selling the venom to the hospital for money. He was amazing. He ran away at 15, joined the Marines, told him he was 18. So he would always his own man, even from childhood. And he taught me a lot because of that, because he knew the woods. He knew, and I think I had talked to you, we had a tamarack tree and the branches grow out sideways. And he told me the names of those trees. He told me to watch the berries that the birds were eating, because then you knew they weren't poisonous. And there was only 2 simple things, but it just amazed me what he knew. I didn't know how much he knew until I was grown, because it was just conversation with Dad. And it wasn't a lot because we worked while we were out there. And we cleared the land, and he built a 30-foot pond from attached to our spring and put perch in it. We had, and as I said, he was very eccentric. He worked for his land, but he worked for the money. He was a machinist in Charlestown shipyard. And that survived us when the gardens weren't growing, etc. And it was a good childhood for me, as I realized later, because he gave me responsibilities early. Any animal, we always had animals on the farm, usually a herd of 36 of whatever it was. When I was young, it was goats. Starting about 10, it was sheep. There were always a herd. And when I hit about 12, he brought in a herd of white-tailed deer, built 10-foot fence all around the land. And he was the only person in the state licensed to keep them in caged within that realm. So we often had visitors come to see our white-tailed deer. And it was kind of a close-knit family in a sense. We weren't, that generation of parents weren't as a rule huggers and lovers and telling us we loved them all the time. I don't ever remember being kissed or hugged by my parents, or they told me I loved them. It was taken for granted. Mm-hmm. You put clothes on our back, they fed us. And that was enough for us because we didn't expect more. And right. like you, we did not have money. We lived off our land. And,
now, can I ask you a question? You were an Irish family.
Yes.
And normally Irish families are large.
Yes.
How big was your family? And everybody had a chore to do, I know, but weren't you the oldest?
No, my brother Russ was 2 years older than I. And then my 3 other brothers were 2 or 3 years younger. And my youngest brother was born when I was 16, which was a little embarrassing for my older brother, as I had said earlier, because he was already at Mass Maritime and he was just appalled that his parents were doing that. So he was quite embarrassed. I was delighted.
All right, we just had, for the listening and viewing audience, I want you to know we just had a major glitch, which Linda fixed. Her computer froze. And so technician and extraordinaire Kim Pincus at ECAT told her to go and unplug her router and then plug it in again. And what do you know? It unfroze. Okay, and today is July 21st, isn't it? Or is it July 20th?
Yes, 21st.
July 21st, 2021. And we're doing the Zoom today because Linda resides in Falmouth and it's a lot easier. So, okay, so we left off, you were talking about your brother's astonishment, older brother Russ, who was in the Maritime Marines, when your mother got pregnant again and had your younger brother. So that was a shock, wasn't it?
That was a shock. Michael was a shock to the whole family. Because we were mostly grown, but it happened a lot in those days. It's still happening today. Let's retract where I was.
So
I
you
have
had five children, right?
There, we ended up, that made 6 children. So it
Okay.
gave me 4 brothers and 1 sister who was, well, she didn't arrive until I was in 3rd grade. So I was already pretty established in Eastondale Grammar School. And there were, as I said, we were 8, 6 to 8, depending. We had 2 come and go during that 5 years, but it was just the 6 boys and Liz Howard and I.
Mhm.
And it was good. It gave me a wider range because there were so few of us, that it gave me the independence to be shortstop on the boys baseball team. And in 5th grade, I ran like a festival on stage downstairs. And I'm dragging kids out of these other grades to practice, and the teacher said nothing. I guess I always looked like I knew what I was doing, even when I wasn't. But they turned out fine. So those are good memories. And those were the years in that same stage when they used to have minstrel shows in blackface. Now that was in 48, 49.
Yeah, well,
And
that's a cultural event that we now know is totally unacceptable.
Unacceptable, complete. We had, and I never once connected their black faces with a culture, because we had no black people in town, not one family, until I was in junior high school.
Yes,
So
that was
I
the
didn't
Heinz.
connect.
Wasn't
Yeah,
that the Heinz family?
He was a dentist. He lived in Southeastern.
Oh,
And of course, Northeastern to me was a planet apart. My mother took me once a week to the Ames Free Library, and where I could sign out the max, I signed out 5 books every week. My mother was an avid reader, 8th grade education, got her diploma when she was carrying her 6th child, she was just an amazing woman. She had books on opera and the classics. And so I grew up in a house filled with books. So I didn't need to go. I went to a library anyway. And she took me because I said, oh, I have to go to the library. She said to me once, you always felt like you knew what you were doing. And she said, I never understood you. And she drove me to know, from the time I hit 6th grade, she was driving me back and forth to this big other town all the time. And she had 6 kids. So it was just, she was an amazing woman with a great talent. And I marveled at her when I was older, when I had children of my own, that feeling.
She laid the foundation for your creative spirit, and
no doubt,
and the writing all these books that you've authored.
Yeah. She was.
So that's great.
So I had a different world from each parent.
Yeah. So I know you had a lot of chores on the farm. You got up early in the morning before you went to school and fed the chickens, and you did other things.
If one of the babies, as I said in that piece I sent you, if a baby sheep or a baby goat mother died in childbirth, then I became the pseudo mother. And every 4 hours while I was home, I had to heat that bottle and get the flashlight and go out and do the 9 o'clock feeding alone in the barn, which I loved. Sitting alone in that barn at night all by myself with these little babies around me, baby goats and then baby sheep. And they'd chew on my long hair while I was feeding the baby. And it was a bit of heaven, because a house filled with 10 people was never peaceful.
No. So
I had a really good, my brothers had it harder because my dad was harder on them. They built and rebuilt stone walls all over our farm, and they had to do 15 stones a day. And we had a lot of stone walls. And because in those days, that was the edge of the property. We didn't have fences or trees. Today they plant trees.
So tell us about that two-room schoolhouse, and you're being in a class with another grade. What was that like? Maybe you can recall some of the experiences you had.
It was normal for me because I knew no different. So I didn't, it was a few years before I realized that, God, there's only 7 of us. Where are the rest of the classes? And first grade was very hard for me because I was used to being out on the farm and independent, and all of a sudden there was no kindergarten yet. So it was first day, full grade, in a dress, which I seldom wore because I wore, in those days we called them dungarees. Now they're jeans. And it was hard for me to adjust to being in a stated area at a certain time. But I had a first grade teacher, and I won't say her name, she's long gone, of course, but she was mean. And it personified it. One day I came to school and I had forgotten my lunch. And all during lunch, you made me lay my head on the table while everybody else ate. And that was my first chance into school. But after that, I had Priscilla Layton for 2 years in the second classroom, and she was a marvel. Loved her. Third grade, she was single. Fourth grade, she was married, and that was just, oh my God. She went from singlehood to motherhood, and it was, we kind of watched her all the time to see how it was when somebody was married. I was 8 years old. I didn't know that much about anything except, babies being born on a farm. Mrs. O'Leary in 5th grade, and she was an amazing woman. She was also the principal of the school, as you say, three rooms and 2 bathrooms. And then the downstairs was the auditorium where everything happened. We ate, we watched shows, and it was a wonderful life. Because we were cloistered, very much so cloistered, much as if even in our high school years, our classes, we were happy days. We literally had O'Connor's newsstand with cherry cokes after school. And it was just an exciting time for a whole decade of students. And even in Northeastern, I realized later, we were also cloistered. At that, it was a different culture for me, but I hit 6th grade, like, holy cow, who are all these people? And it was a good adjustment for me. By then I was getting used to people. But even in grammar school, we had wonderful teachers. One, a music teacher, I played violin in those days, and he took our little orchestra to all the other schools, the Pequannock and Southeastern. Unionville School, the grammar schools. And we entertained. So we were made to feel important, even though we weren't famous. It was a huge thing to get in a bus and go to in my mind, a different town. It was simply part of the same Easton, but they were different towns to me.
Tell me something, Linda. Did Robert King teach you how to play the violin?
No, I learned in 4th grade, you could pick an instrument.
Okay.
So I picked, and it was the music teacher. It wasn't him. I don't remember who it was, but they came around, much as Pat Gurney, and Jim Elson's wife, when I was doing special needs work later.
Ginny.
Yeah, sweetheart. They were sweethearts. They were so good to I was in the special needs classroom as an aide, and they were amazing what they taught those children. And they came so well equipped.
Yeah,
and
well, they're still amazing people to this day. They're wonderful, both of them. And good. I actually interviewed Jim Elson with his classmate and I think they were 56, right?
Yes, they were.
Yeah. And Joe Giordano. So there's a growing up in Easton, Joe Giordano and Jim Elson was really good. So yeah. So then
now Joe, I introduced him to his wife. She is my nursing classmate.
Oh no. Okay. Alice.
Yeah. And Alice. Jimmy and I dated when I was in nursing school. He was at Colgate.
Really?
We were never really more than friends, but it was, you dated because you were comfortable with them, that kind of thing. And yeah, he was of course the king of the school in high school. He
Right.
was the it guy in
He was.
basketball.
Yeah, he was the center, and was he 6'4",
He
5"?
was
I don't know.
6'5", I think he was. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
and
captain of the basketball team, but we were only allowed in mid-court. We weren't allowed to run the whole court in those days.
it wasn't that terrible. I don't know what
It was
they were doing.
terrible.
Yeah, and that was what happened in the 50s. They scrapped the former rules because my mother, who's in the All Reims Athletic Hall of Fame, Ene Larson Almquist, she played full court press, men's rules during the 20s, and their games were often on Friday nights.
Right.
And that's how my father met my mother, because my father was a standout star at Brockton High School in basketball. And he heard about my mother and he wanted to see her play. And but now things are back to normal.
Thank goodness. That was so frustrating because my brother Russell won state championships running. It was never even considered that I could do that. Because when I played field hockey, I raced. I was an end. And of course, we had to practice before we went to practice every day at Frothingham Park. We had to run around the whole track. Yeah. And my boyfriend at the time was the captain on the football team. And he said to me one day, we all stopped practice to watch you running around the track because you were so fast. I said,
Again, that was a product of the 50s, and
yes.
I post World War II, women were, they lost a lot because the men who came home from war were elevated, and the women were downgraded because my mother also ran track. She ran the 800, the 400, and she was in the finals. The Olympic finals tryouts in Boston for high jump. And she cleared the 5 foot, and 5 feet, but she said her thumb got caught on the bar on the way down. And the other woman then got a chance and she made it, and she went on to the Olympics, and not my mother. So in those days, in the 20s, women did everything. They played basketball just like the men. Yep. They ran track. My mother was on field hockey too. I mean, she was quite an athlete.
And they danced a mean Charleston in the 20s.
So, but then that 50s setback,
it was awful for those of us who wanted to do it all.
Yeah, when I played basketball, Ann Taylor, she was a year ahead of me, and she was really a wonderful star and player.
She was the one I usually threw it to because I was the center guard.
Oh, okay.
And from the time she was a freshman, she was the one to get those points. We couldn't. We had to stop at the middle and hand it off, which drove me nuts, but that was it.
Yeah, it was. But thank goodness women's sports have come full circle, and now.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah.
Yeah. So were you in the orchestra in high school?
I was until 9th grade. It was my last year of violin playing.
Okay.
And I so looked up to, I think her name was Kathleen McCarthy. Kathleen? Yeah, the oil business people. And I saw her years later because she played a beautiful violin. I never forgot her playing Arabian Nights when they were playing like that. And I saw her years later and she didn't play anymore. And I felt so bad because she was so good. But again, in those days, they didn't push the women.
No, they didn't push the women, the young girls. No, because you're supposed to marry and have babies and stay home.
Or be a secretary or be a nurse, which I did. I had some opening. However,
in Easton, from what I'm finding out from my growing up in Easton interviews, is that because of the independence that we had, we got on our bikes and
every Saturday,
and we were told to come home when the street lights came on.
Exactly.
we went skating on the ponds without parents. We, you know, from what I've learned, that independence and gave people the perseverance to pursue their dreams.
Very
So that
true.
look at you, and you know, you're an author of 11 books now.
10,
And
only 10.
10, but you're going to publish the 11th, right?
No, this is the 10th.
Oh, the 10th.
That was my goal, to get to the 10th before I hit 82 or the grave. So
Okay.
I'm there.
What
In
we're
fact,
gonna,
this is, I don't know if you can
what we're
see.
going to do. Oh,
That's it. That's the one coming up. It's
Oh.
it's called Moments in Time, Short Stories and Poems for Adults.
okay.
Because
So I
that's-
think
Okay.
maybe what you could do is take a photo, line up all your books, take a photo and send it to the studio, and they can put it online at the end of this interview. How would that
Oh,
be?
wow. I'm not sure. I can take a photo. I don't know how to put it on into the internet.
No, you just attach it to an email.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay.
Again, I
Well-
seldom do that, but I'll try.
You can get one of your children to do it.
That's a good idea. That's a better idea.
So, but in terms of life's goals, most of us had high ones. I mean, you became an
Thank you.
RN, and I became a teacher and then a lawyer.
And then a
And-
lawyer, right?
Yeah, and so we had, and almost everybody I've interviewed, they did extraordinary things, and they're extraordinary people. So that independence was so valuable, wasn't it?
It really was. And when I think of that, Janice Grayson was one of my classmates. She was a sweetheart, great personality. And I think she gave us one of the biggest gifts in Easton. Her son is Frank Menino, our historical. Yeah. And his mother was my classmate in high school. She
Really?
went on to have 5. She went the marriage route, and she had 5 children. And you never knew she was there, but she was just very, very good person.
Okay, and what was her name?
Janice Grayson.
Janice Grayson.
Yeah.
Okay,
You know,
and
when I was going to do this, I brought up, this is what we used to do when we were only 49 in the class. Once
Oh,
they
yeah.
hit 200, they stopped. But there was one, it's a picture of every one of them. And I've got Janice's.
and so Linda, how many were in your class?
49. That's
49.
Janice.
And there you are.
Yeah, that's her. She's adorable.
Oh, that's her.
That's her.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's right. And where are you?
I'll give it to Frank.
Oh, yeah, with the glasses. Oh, how pretty she
Yes.
was. Yeah.
And it was, so we had every graduation picture, we had it on the sheet. We all got one.
Yeah.
It's amazing where they've all gone and come. And I look at each person, and there's different memories with each person.
So tell us one of the memories, perhaps with one of your friends.
Because we were like siblings more than classmates. We all knew who was dating, who was running around, which there weren't many in those days because everybody went steady in my high school in those years. Everyone had a boyfriend. We didn't run with single. It was always doubles going everywhere. And that was kind of sad too, because it was what was expected. You kind of had to have a boyfriend. So, and again, that was in my widow's window. I went through that a little bit because my boyfriend of over 2 years broke up with me. He was a senior, I was a junior, because, well, if you love me, you do it. And I was too afraid of that father at home to do anything like that. And so it went away, but I had to go to his senior reception. He had a girlfriend because I was one of the usherettes. And it just broke my heart, 17 years old. And here's this boy I grew up with, and we shared secrets like you did in those days. I guess maybe they still do. And he just broke up with him. One day he said to me in the corridor, "She doesn't wear a bra." I mean, those were innocent days. And for him to say that to me, it was just, I was horrified. Well, he went in the Army the next year, and didn't he write me a letter? Could we please be engaged? But don't tell anybody, it's our secret. And by then I knew enough. So I said, go away. Yeah. And he, even a year later, I saw him and he said, you know what you're doing with your life. I don't. I said, well, I'll agree with that one. That's the last time I ever saw him.
Yeah.
And
Okay. And so tell me about an escapade that you might have had with a girlfriend from those days.
Oh, escapade. Well, there were 7 of us in my class, and we became what we called ourselves the Debs. And we met, and we were pretty much the nerds of today. We'd be called nerds because we were all pretty much honor students. And we get together every Wednesday night and we do homework, unless Elvis was on television. And then we all watched Elvis. But at the same time, the boys who were around us in school, all classmates, would come and look in our windows. And this included Jack Strom and Matt Welch, who was just a handful and a half from day one. I'm Nancy, honey. And so that was the big deal. The guys were looking in our windows. They had
Really?
come to.
Yeah.
That was
well, I remember when we had sleepovers that the guys would come, and we always had a sleepover in the cellar, which was like a rec room, and the boys would come and look in the windows, and then they'd tap on the windows, and then we'd go out and say hi. You know.
Oh God, yeah. The more courageous did that. I wasn't that quite courageous. I think because I was going steady. Maybe that's why it didn't bother me.
Now, when you went steady, didn't you take the boys' class ring and put it on a chain and hang it around your neck?
Always. Yeah, for a couple of years. And he wore my ring on his little finger while he played football for a few years with this ring on. I got a pack, it was mangled. I'd been through football games for 2 years.
Yeah.
Later I could laugh about that.
Sure.
Once we grew up.
So what is one of the fondest memories that you recall from your high school years?
I think the socials that we planned. We'd get out of class and go down and we'd make big 6-foot pictures of a car, which one was, the big one was Oasis. And what it was, I decided, to be honest, that we'd have everything about Egypt. So we had harem girls, and everything was a plan. And then we'd paint up these huge things and hang them on the wall, and it would be so exciting. We'd be dressed up, which we didn't do a lot of in a little town. Mm-hmm. And even though Easton, I think, was, as I remember, and this is my memory, 29 square miles, was bigger than Brockton. But it was all woods. It's 70 years ago. In our mind, it was still a little country. It reminds me much like West Bridgewater is today. When I go through West Bridgewater, I feel like I'm back in Easton 60 years ago.
Yeah,
well, it's still quaint,
I graduated 3 years after you.
Right.
And at that time, at our time, there were only 6,000 people in Easton. So it was, I remember at 16, my cousin Carolyn took her 1938 coupe and taught me how to drive with a stick shift on Bay Road. Why? Because Bay Road only had 3 houses and they were all farms. Yes. And our milkman was Mr. Gooch, and he had one of the farms.
Isn't that amazing?
And he would come in the back door. I can still see him with his overalls that had that wonderful fragrance of cow manure. Uh-huh. And he'd bring the milk in the kitchen and then have a lovely chat with my mother. He was not in a hurry. Everybody knew that the milk would arrive sooner or later. and
right.
it was okay. And, people cared for each other in a way that was, like Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village.
Yes,
Well, we had a village in our town.
right. I agree. Yes, very much so.
And,
We
I,
we knew
I
we knew
remember,
all the people, and they knew us.
yes. And the other thing is, when you had a child that was intellectually challenged, the child stayed at home. The
Yes,
child was not put in an institution. The child
right,
was loved, and the child accompanied the parent everywhere. So if you're downtown Easton and you're going into O'Connor's news store, and you met a mother with one of those children, you treated that child with the same dignity and respect you would treat anyone.
of course.
And and then the other thing was, every parent, and maybe this is your experience, every parent was a parent to everybody else, every other
True.
child. So
That's
if
true.
so I can remember seeing a parent discipline a child who was not his or her own, and
Mhm,
it was commonly accepted as the proper thing to do.
right.
Now look at today,
Oh my God. It's true. It's true. It's
it's
just,
mind your own business.
yeah, that's not my kid, so I don't care.
Right.
Attitude, mine, and that the poem I used to say quite often, who's that filthy, dirty child buried from head to foot in grime? You'd think his mother would have some. Oh my God, I think he's mine. And that's always stuck with me, because
Yeah.
until it was personal, it was nothing.
Right.
And that poem personified to me that 60s generation.
So looking back, I've had so many people say on this show, they've said it was the best town to grow up in. It was the best place on the planet. My childhood was so wonderful, and it gave me so much to guide my life in the future.
Right,
So,
right.
so and
And we had idols too. Oh, I had idols, perhaps not the others, but Paul Matrano, it was his own Chevrolet.
yes,
And
Paul Matrano.
Paul Matrano paid for my whole class to go to the Boston Red Sox, and we had an envelope, which I think may be wrong, but I think that came from Mary Frothingham, $5 in an envelope to spend that day.
Wow.
And that was unbelievable to me. My father made $60 a week, and this person is giving me $5, a big portion of what he made. And we had others. We had what was Coach Betty?
Val Moscato.
Oh no, the woman.
Oh, Barrows.
Betty Barrows. She gave me free swimming lessons when I was in grammar school, because my mother had she had the persistence that, because we didn't have a lot of money, she found ways to educate me, and she would drive me up to Long Pond in the summer, and I would have free lessons from Coach Barrows, who later coached me all 4 years in high school. So it was
Wow.
like I had come back to a friend.
Right. And of course there was no charge.
Oh, no charge. No. We had a free town. We had free library. It was called Ames Free Library.
Right.
And it was wonderful. They had, because in those days I was able to take out, just like a book, the kaleidoscope things. You put I don't even remember what they called them. It had a unique name. You put the double picture into the scope, and then you looked at it and it was 3D. I'm
Right.
sure.
It was a negative.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
It's been so long since I thought of that.
Yeah.
But
So,
we had access to all that kind of thing.
Yes. And I think we appreciated the contributions of the Ames family.
Oh my God, yeah.
Which gave us the best library probably in the entire state.
I agree. Yeah. They gave us so much that we weren't aware of till I ended up being the nurse for Blanche Ames and for Nancy Ames at the end of her life. And it was only then that I realized these were the families that literally gave me my education about the world.
Yes.
Because they made it possible for me.
right.
And it's just,
Well, I forgot that you were the private nurse for Blanche Ames, who was the
Yeah.
wife of Oakes Ames, but Blanche is now the school, the elementary school, which is currently being built, is going to be named after Blanche.
oh, how wonderful. She was
Yeah.
so brilliant.
Yes,
So
and
brilliant.
she was a wonderful artist. Her paintings, her oil paintings are magnificent, but she was also a cartoonist for the suffragette movement, and she was the president of the suffragists in Massachusetts.
First
And
and president of First Planned Parenthood in Mass.
is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
And the irony of the thing is, something I never knew was that Mary Frothingham was opposed to suffrage, the vote for women. So here you have two Ameses, Mary, who says women should know their place and not vote, and then you
Yes.
have Blanche saying, of course we should vote. We're full citizens of this country.
Right.
And so very interesting to see that
All in one
interfamily.
town. All in one
Yes.
town. I mean, 3 castles in one town. Who else can say that?
I know.
That's amazing.
Well, listen, thank you so much. Are there any parting words, anything you want to say about growing up in Easton that you haven't said already that's important to transmit to our audience?
I think primarily just thank you so much for letting me grow up there. It's been a privilege for me looking back that I had that chance.
Mm,
and
wonderful.
just thank you to everybody who helped me. There were many.
Well, I think that gratitude is the message that we all share.
I think
And
so.
I want to thank you again so much for coming and being part of this. And these programs, Growing Up in Easton, are being archived at the Eastern Historical Society. So your
Amazing.
friend Janice's son, Frank Menino,
He's wonderful. He's such a help.
he is, and
He's
he
a
will
good
be.
man.
He'll be in charge of that. So we're going to give some permanent ones, and then some that people can that can be loaned out too.
Okay.
So, yeah,
I've never seen any of I've done 3 or 4 television things over the years with disaster mercy for Red Cross and for my books. I've never seen one of them. So
really,
that's one day.
Okay. Well, here's what you do. You just give Frank a call or shoot him an email and tell him to send them to you.
Oh, my goodness.
It's not rocket science anymore, Linda.
It is to me. It really is. But
I
thank you
know.
so much, Priscilla, for all that you do. You've always been an advocate for everything. You know,
Thank you.
family heritage, and you persevered when you didn't have to. You did it because you needed to.
Yes, and so did you.
Yeah.
And I think that the genesis of that perseverance, that reaching for the stars, that keeping the dream alive,
Right. Gotta have a dream.
Right, all that stems from the childhood and the people who were there for us.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you again, Linda Manning Williams, and we look forward to this.
And I was a Crowley for 10 years. Well, 15 years.
You were what?
I was a Crowley in between that because I married Jack Crowley when I came out of nursing, and he died 10 years later when our children were 2, 5, and 7. And we lived on borderland at the time.
I see. Yes. And you wrote in that wonderful book,
Through the Widow's Window.
The Widow's Window, I think, and of course that's at the Ames Free Library. And anybody who wants to read a very wonderful, touching, marvelous book, and you don't have to be a widow to read it. But
I do have to put in a plug. I will be doing book signings at your Christmas festival, Festival of Trees.
Yeah, Festival of Trees.
I will be there. I don't know when it is yet, but I will be there with my new books. Good. And some of my old ones, so I get to see my older friends while we're still here.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't talk about was that you have written several children's books, and they all come from your experiences on the farm with the sheep, the goats, the deer, and all of that.
Right.
So those parents who are viewing this know that you hopefully you'll bring some of those children's books with you at that time.
You froze.
till the other.
All right,
Okay,
hon. You take
thank you
care.
so much. So this is Priscilla Almquist-Olsen signing off today with a wonderful interview with Linda Manning Williams. And hopefully you have appreciated and enjoyed looking back and walking down memory lane and looking back at Easton in the 40s and 50s, and have learned a great deal about what life was like growing up in Easton. Thank you again for watching. Until next time, be well.